who eloped to Europe with his little mistress 5 years ago, was in the terminal stage of lung cancer. He endured a 10-hour flight, dragging his half-dead body back to me, holding on to his very last breath. He stared at me with fake devotion, leaned in, and whispered in my ear, "Chloe, I know you have a good heart. After I'm gone, please, please, please take care of Haley and our baby." I couldn't believe this asshole had the nerve to make such a shameless request on his deathbed. I let out a cold laugh. Sure, I'll make sure they're very well taken care of. The moment Ethan drew his last breath, I immediately called someone to drag him to the crematorium. I wasn't going to waste a single penny hiring a proper hearse for his cursed corpse. I wrapped him in a ragged bedsheet and called a local junk removal guy. I handed him $50 to toss the body into the back of his rusty pickup truck and drive it to the crematorium. At the crematorium, I completely ignored the judgmental stares of the staff and said directly, "Give me the cheapest cremation package. Just burn him to ashes. That's all I care about." While Ethan's body was literally smoking inside the furnace, his beloved little princess Haley rushed in. She collapsed right outside the cremation room, wailing like a banshee, snot and tears dripping down her face. If you didn't know any better, you'd think she was Ethan's rightful wife. I felt a surge of petty satisfaction. Wow, quite the performance. Ethan really didn't spoil you for nothing these past few years. Haley was holding a baby in her arms, and the poor thing was looking around, completely confused. Once she was done with her dramatic crying session, Haley wiped her tears and walked straight up to me. She pointed her freshly manicured hand at me and demanded, "Venmo me $200 first. Baby is out of formula." I burst out laughing on the spot. "Your baby is out of formula? How's that my fucking problem?" Haley's eyes widened. "Chloe Miller, don't play dumb with me. Ethan begged you to take care of us before he died. If my baby starves to death, how are you going to face his ghost?" I casually toyed with my Gucci bag. He did say that before he kicked the bucket, but I smirked, looking her up and down. I never agreed to it. He cheated on me, and now he wants me to raise his mistress and love child? Please, I'm not insane. Haley got frantic, her voice screeching to a higher pitch. "What do you mean love child? Chloe, do you have a conscience? You are barren. You couldn't give Ethan a child to carry on the Carter family legacy. It was me, Haley, who gave him a son. I did your job for you. I fulfilled your duty as the daughter-in-law of the Carter family." The more she spoke, the more arrogant she became, practically rolling her eyes to the ceiling. "If it weren't for me, you would be the disgrace of the Carter family. You should be grateful to me. You should serve me delicious food and help me raise Ethan's son. Do you get it?" She was right about one thing. I was medically unable to have children. But the Carters were just a bunch of hillbillies from a rundown farmhouse in the middle of nowhere small town where they literally raised pigs in the backyard. They weren't some royal family. What legacy was there to inherit? Inherit their poverty. I smiled coldly. "Too bad I have no money. Didn't you two steal everything I had?" I wasn't lying. 5 years ago, right before they eloped, they took advantage of the fact that I was teaching a class and robbed my house blind. My Chanel lambskin bag, my Van Cleef Arpels bracelet, my designer fur coat, all of it became the capital for their luxurious life abroad. Before they left, Haley even kicked my dog. My poor golden retriever was so traumatized, he didn't eat properly for 3 days. Hearing me say no money, Haley's eyes darted to my bag again. She pointed at my Gucci bag. "If you don't have money, how can you afford such an expensive bag? It's a fake." She then pointed to my red Audi parked outside the crematorium. "If you don't have money, how do you drive such a nice car?" Haley was so choked up with anger, she couldn't say a word. Suddenly, the baby in her arms started crying from hunger. Hearing the baby cry, Haley's arrogant attitude instantly vanished. She took a step closer to me, her voice softening. "Look at how hungry the baby is. Just give me some cash for formula. I've been a stay-at-home mom these past few years. All the money we spent was Ethan's, who knew he would suddenly get lung cancer. He spent every last cent on treatments, and even sold our apartment. He left us a single dime. You know, I didn't even finish high school. I can't find a job to support a baby. Ethan told me to come to you before he died. He said you are sweet and kind and that for the sake of your marriage, you wouldn't abandon his child." With that, she lifted the crying baby toward my face, trying to play the pity card. I took a glance. The baby was actually quite chubby and cute with rosy cheeks. He was rooting around with his tiny mouth looking for milk. Adorable. Too bad he wasn't mine. If he starved, it had nothing to do with me. I don't have money, believe it or not. I threw those cold words at her, turned around and walked away. Wait. Haley quickly blocked my path. Seeing that her pity act didn't work, panic flashed in her eyes. She slipped a heavy, thick gold bracelet off her wrist and practically begged. This was the token of love Ethan gave me. It's a Carter family heirloom. I couldn't bear to sell it. "Can I leave this with you as collateral? Just lend me some money to buy formula first." Unbelievable. I was married to Ethan for 7 years, and I never knew his family had a gold heirloom. I didn't expect such a nice thing to end up on her wrist. "Oh, this precious thing is the symbol of your beautiful love. I wouldn't dare to take it." Haley panicked and thrust the baby closer to me. "Again, Chloe Miller. Look at how cute this baby is. Do you really have the heart to let such an innocent baby starve?" "Of course I do. I'm not his mother." I left her with those words and drove away, leaving Haley standing there in utter shock. After cremating Ethan and brushing off Haley, my mood had been absolutely fantastic for the past few days. I was having dinner at home, humming a song, when suddenly there was a loud knock on my door. I looked through the peephole. A local police officer was standing outside. Next to him were Ethan's parents, both looking incredibly sullen. Haley was holding the baby, hiding behind Ethan's mother, Margaret, sobbing dramatically like a victim in a soap opera. The moment I opened the door, Margaret barged in aggressively, pointing her finger at my face and screaming, "Chloe Miller, where did you bury my son?" "Oh, you mean that?" I raised an eyebrow, calmly walked over to the trash can, fished out a box and threw it at Margaret's feet. "Here's your son's ashes. Take them and get out of my sight before I throw them into the dumpster. How dare you put my son in a cheap cardboard box?" Margaret lost her mind, lunging at me. The police officer had to hold her back. I pointed at the box with a bright smile. "Hey, look closely. That's not a cheap cardboard box. That's a high-end Chanel shoebox. Your son got to lie in Chanel after he died. Honestly, he lived a successful life." Hearing this, Margaret gasped, her eyes rolling back as she fainted into her husband George's arms. I didn't bother looking at her and politely turned to the police officer. "Officer, how can I help you?" I glared at Haley, then smiled at the cop. "It's not illegal for me to refuse to raise my ex-husband's mistress and their love child, right?" No, the officer replied, looking like he was enjoying the drama. "I'm not here for that." He pointed at Margaret. "This lady claims that the apartment you are living in right now was her son's premarital property. Now that her son is dead, and since you refused to help raise the child, she wants to reclaim this apartment so she can sell it to support her grandson. She called me here today to supervise your eviction. Exactly. It means pack your bags and get the hell out, Haley added triumphantly. Hearing the word eviction, I suddenly got excited. This apartment was indeed Ethan's personal property before we got married. According to the law, after his death, I really had no right to keep it. Although the Carters were dirt poor, Ethan was quite a handsome guy when he was younger. With his curly hair and green eyes, he used to charm a lot of girls. He had been a sugar baby for a wealthy older woman back in the day. When she got tired of him and wanted to dump him, he wouldn't let her go. To get rid of him, the wealthy woman gave him this apartment as a parting gift. He hid this shameful past and used his handsome face to deceive me, a naive girl who had just graduated from college. He told me he bought this apartment because he won a lottery. He also brainwashed me into believing he was a devoted, child-free guy who didn't care about my infertility. Just like that, I moved into this apartment with millions of dollars in wedding funds my parents had worked their entire lives to save for me. I moved in with beautiful dreams of a happy marriage, only to be scammed until I almost had nothing left. Officer, if this apartment really belonged to Ethan, I would gladly pack up and leave. However, I pulled a property deed from my nightstand and handed it to the cop with a smile. Take a look. The legal owner of this apartment is actually my dad. The officer took the deed, checked it, and nodded at me. Yes, the property is indeed registered under Arthur Miller. Impossible. That's impossible. My son worked so hard serving that rich woman to get this apartment. How could Margaret, who had just fainted, come back to life like a coiled spring? She snatched the deed from the officer's hand. When she saw the words property owner, Arthur Miller, ownership, sole ownership, she started pacing around the living room, stomping her feet in a frenzy. How is this possible, officer? You need to investigate her. This deed must be fake. Haley was also dumbfounded. She grabbed the deed, stared at it, and her face went completely pale. Ethan's dad, George, reached out to support her, but after a timid glance at his wife, Margaret, he quickly pulled his hand back. I smiled at Margaret. The deed is real. Your son voluntarily gifted this apartment to my father. I pulled out a signed property gift agreement from the drawer and tossed it at Margaret. See for yourself. Is that your son's signature? Margaret was completely devastated. She collapsed onto the floor like a puddle of water, muttering, How? How did this happen? The police officer, fully invested in the gossip now, asked, Miss Miller, what exactly is going on here? I smiled and opened my laptop, playing a video from 5 years ago. It was the security footage from my living room. In the video, Haley and Ethan walked into my apartment and started looting the place like bandits. My Chanel bag taken. My Van Cleef Arpels bracelet taken. My designer fur coat taken. Just like that, under the bright light of day, my millions of dollars worth of wedding gifts were stuffed into their trash bags. Ethan never dreamed that I had security cameras installed. I had originally installed them to watch my dog while I was at work, but they ended up capturing their shameless theft. Officer, these luxury goods were premarital assets gifted by my parents. Ethan stole and sold them. Does that count as grand theft and trafficking stolen goods? Absolutely. The officer nodded firmly. Exactly. I smirked at Haley. Did you really think I wouldn't do anything about it? Haley's face turned white. Ethan didn't steal anything, she screamed. I laughed. Really? Then why are you in the video? The room went silent. The footage continued playing. There was Haley, 5 years younger, casually stuffing my Chanel bag into a suitcase. Then Ethan walked over with my jewelry box. He opened it. He looked directly at the security camera and smiled. I paused the video. Officer, I believe that's enough evidence. The officer nodded. Margaret immediately rushed toward the laptop. That's my son's property. I stepped between her and the computer. No, it wasn't. I pulled out the original receipts. My parents bought every single item shown in that video. The receipts are in their names. I also have the original purchase records and photographs for my wedding. I smiled. And I have something even better. I opened another folder. Bank transfers. The officer leaned closer. What's this? The money Ethan and Haley received after selling my belongings. I tapped the screen. 5 years ago, they sold my jewelry, my bags, my coat, and several other items. They transferred the money into an overseas account. Haley's lips began trembling. Chloe. I looked at her. What? You don't understand. Oh, I understand perfectly. I crossed my arms. You two ran away together with my property. You spent 5 years living off the proceeds. Then Ethan got sick, came crawling back to me, and expected me to raise the family he built behind my back. I laughed softly. And now that he's dead, you're still trying to steal from me. Haley burst into tears. We were desperate. 5 years ago? I raised an eyebrow. You were desperate 5 years ago? She froze. Because that's when you stole my things. The police officer cleared his throat. Mr. and Mrs. Carter, Haley, I think everyone needs to calm down. Margaret suddenly pointed at me. You planned this. I blinked. Planned what? You knew my son was going to die. I stared at her. Unfortunately, no. Then I smiled. But I didn't know he'd eventually regret leaving me. Margaret's expression twisted. You heartless woman. Heartless. I glanced at the Chanel box sitting on the floor. I paid for his cremation. I shrugged. That was practically charity. The officer covered his mouth, obviously trying not to laugh. Margaret looked like she was about to explode. Then the officer turned serious. Haley, Ethan's parents, I need all of you to come to the station. Haley panicked. Why? Because we're investigating the theft. Her knees nearly buckled. No. She immediately grabbed her baby tighter. I'm a mother. You can't arrest me. The officer looked at her calmly. Being a mother doesn't exempt anyone from the law. Haley turned toward me. Chloe, please. I said nothing. Please, I'll give everything back. I laughed. Everything. She nodded desperately. Yes, that's cute. I leaned against the doorway. You already sold everything 5 years ago. Her face collapsed. I continued. But don't worry. I smiled sweetly. I'll make sure you get the chance to explain exactly where every dollar went. Margaret suddenly shouted. You can't do this to us. I looked at her. I didn't. I pointed toward the police officer. Your son did. George had been silent the entire time. Now he finally spoke. Margaret. She turned toward him. What? George swallowed. Maybe we should stop. She stared at him. Stop what? Everything. For the first time, Margaret looked genuinely frightened. George lowered his voice. Our son is dead. He glanced at Haley. And we're standing in his ex-wife's house demanding money from her while the police are investigating us. Haley began crying again. But this time, nobody comforted her. The officer motioned toward the door. Let's go. As Haley passed me, she stopped. Her eyes were red. You really don't care about the baby? I looked at the child, then back at her. No, she gasped. I smiled. Because caring about a child doesn't magically make me responsible for the choices his parents made. She opened her mouth. Nothing came out. I stepped aside. Good luck. The police escorted them away. I closed the door. Silence. Finally, I walked back into my living room, picked up my Gucci bag, and poured myself a glass of wine. Then my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered. Hello. A man's voice came through. Ms. Miller? Yes. This is the bank's fraud department. I frowned. What happened? We've discovered something unusual regarding your former husband's overseas accounts. My expression changed. What kind of unusual? He appears to have transferred a substantial amount of money shortly before returning to the country. How much? There was a pause. Approximately $3 million. I nearly laughed. $3 million? Ethan had spent years telling me he was broke. The bank employee continued. And Ms. Miller? Yes. The account lists you as the beneficiary. I froze. What? The money was transferred into a trust under your name. I slowly sat down. Ethan had left me $3 million. But I wasn't touched. I wasn't grateful. I wasn't suddenly sentimental. I simply smiled. Because if Ethan had finally decided to give me something, I was going to find out exactly where that money came from. And if it had been stolen from someone else, well, I'd gladly hand it over. After all, I wasn't Ethan. I didn't steal from innocent people. I only took back what belonged to me. The bank employee's next words made my smile disappear. There's one more thing, Ms. Miller. What? The $3 million isn't Ethan's. I sat up. Then whose is it? We don't know yet. But the transfer was made from an account belonging to a company called North Star Holdings. My eyebrows rose. Why would a company send $3 million to a trust in my name? That's exactly what we're trying to determine. I hung up. For the first time since Ethan's death, I felt genuinely curious. I opened my laptop and searched the company. North Star Holdings. My eyes widened. I knew that name. It belonged to the wealthy woman who had given Ethan the apartment. The woman Margaret had always called a rich old hag. Apparently, Ethan hadn't just been her sugar baby. He'd been much more deeply involved in her business than he'd ever admitted. Then I noticed something. The transfer wasn't made 5 years ago. It had been made 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks before Ethan returned to me. I leaned back. So, Ethan? I whispered to myself. What exactly were you planning? My phone rang again. This time it was my lawyer. Chloe, I just received some documents from Ethan's estate. Estate? Yes. I almost laughed. What estate? He died with nothing. That's what I thought. My lawyer sounded unusually serious. But there's a sealed letter addressed specifically to you. Send it. It also contains a USB drive. I paused. Send that too. 20 minutes later, a courier arrived. I opened the envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter. Chloe, if you're reading this, I'm already dead. I rolled my eyes. Obviously. I continued. I know you hate me. You have every right to. But there's something you don't know. My smile faded. Haley wasn't the reason I left you. I stared at the page. Then I laughed. Of course. Even dead, Ethan wanted to make himself mysterious. I kept reading. 5 years ago, I didn't leave you because I fell in love with Haley. I left because I was terrified of what would happen if you discovered the truth about my family. I frowned. His family? The Carters? The people who raised pigs in their backyard? I kept reading. My parents aren't poor. I stopped. What? I read the sentence again. The Carter family fortune was hidden after my grandfather's death. My father and mother have spent years pretending to be poor because they were hiding assets from creditors and investigators. I slowly lowered the letter. Suddenly, everything clicked. The farmhouse, the fake poverty, the constant obsession with money. The gold bracelet Haley claimed was a family heirloom. I grabbed my phone and searched for Carter family holdings. Nothing. Then I searched deeper. Old company registrations, shell companies, property records, trusts. My eyes widened. These bastards. There were dozens of properties registered under different corporations. Luxury apartments, commercial buildings, a warehouse, even a private estate outside the city. The Carters weren't poor. They were hiding millions. And Ethan had known. I continued reading. Haley knows about the money. That's why she stayed with me. She wasn't just my mistress. She was trying to get access to the Carter Trust. I stared at the page. Then came the part that made me laugh. And Chloe, there's something else. The $3 million transferred into your name isn't mine. It's your wedding money. My smile vanished. My parents' money. The millions I'd brought into that marriage. The money Ethan and Haley had spent while living in Europe. He had somehow recovered it. But how? I turned the page. I found the records after I got sick. Haley and I sold your belongings, but that wasn't enough. She also convinced me to drain your wedding account. I lied to you about where the money went. My fingers tightened around the paper. So, he'd finally admitted it. Not that I needed his confession. I already knew. Then I reached the final paragraph. I know you won't forgive me. I'm not asking you to. I'm asking you to destroy Haley. I blinked. Then I burst out laughing. Finally. For once, Ethan had made a reasonable request. I grabbed the USB drive. Let's see what you left me. I plugged it into my laptop. One folder appeared. Carter family everything. Inside were bank statements, property records, offshore transfers, recordings, photographs, and years of financial documents. I stared at the screen. Then I smiled. Haley had spent 5 years believing she had stolen my life. She hadn't. She had only stolen enough rope to hang herself with. And now she was going to find out exactly who she'd been stealing from. I picked up my phone and called my lawyer. Cancel everything on my schedule tomorrow. What are you planning? I smiled. I'm going shopping. For what? I looked at the Carter family financial records. Their entire family. That broke, helpless woman? Daniel nodded. Apparently, she's been the beneficial owner for years. I leaned back. So, while she was crying about not having money for baby formula, I pointed at the screen. She owned a company worth tens of millions. Daniel nodded slowly. There's more. Of course there was. He opened another document. A transfer. $3 million. From North Star Holdings. To the trust in my name. I stared at it. Why would Haley send me my own money? Daniel looked at the date. Because she didn't. What? The transfer was authorized using Ethan's credentials. I frowned. Daniel continued. Ethan apparently discovered Haley had been siphoning money from North Star. I smiled. So, he stole the money back. Technically, yes. Then transferred it to me. Apparently. I leaned back. For the first time, I almost felt sorry for Ethan. Almost. Then I remembered the 5 years he spent cheating on me. Never mind. Daniel suddenly pointed at another document. Wait, what? There are several transfers from North Star to an account belonging to Margaret. I narrowed my eyes. How much? About $800,000. I laughed. So Margaret wasn't just protecting Haley. No. Daniel opened another file. She was helping her. Everything suddenly made sense. Margaret knew. George knew. Haley knew. They had all been working together. And Ethan had apparently decided to expose them only after discovering he was dying. Classic. I picked up my phone. Call the police. Daniel raised an eyebrow. Now. No. I smiled. Not yet. I opened my contacts. I want one person first. Who? The wealthy woman who gave Ethan the apartment. Daniel looked surprised. You know her? No. But Ethan did. I smiled. And I'm about to find out exactly how much she knows. 2 hours later, I walked into a private office downtown. An elegant older woman sat behind the desk. She looked at me for several seconds. Then she smiled. You're Chloe. I froze. You know me? I've known about you for years. She gestured toward the chair. Sit. I sat. She poured 2 cups of tea. Ethan told me you were kind. I almost choked. He lied. She laughed. I figured. Then she pushed a folder toward me. I believe this belongs to you. I opened it. Inside were photographs. Ethan, Haley, Margaret, George, and several other people. My expression hardened. What is this? The first time I realized Ethan was stealing from you. I looked up. You knew. I knew he was a liar. She sighed. I didn't know how far he'd go. Then she pulled out another photograph. This one showed Haley entering a bank. Behind her was Margaret. And in Margaret's hand was my father's signature. Except, it wasn't real. I stared at it. Forgery. She nodded. Your father's signature was forged to transfer ownership of several assets. My blood ran cold. So, they weren't just stealing my wedding gifts. No. She looked me directly in the eyes. They were trying to steal your family's assets too. I slowly smiled. Good. She raised an eyebrow. Good. I closed the folder. Because now I don't feel even slightly guilty. I stood. How soon can we expose them? She smiled. Tomorrow. I smiled back. Perfect. Because tomorrow, Haley was going to discover that the woman she'd spent 5 years calling barren, useless, and heartless, was the only person standing between her and prison. The next morning, I didn't go to the police. I went to the courthouse. Daniel was already waiting for me. Everything is ready. I looked at the stack of documents. Good. What are you planning to file first? I smiled. Everything. He stared at me. Everything. Fraud. Forgery. Theft. Asset concealment. Whatever the evidence supports. I sat down. And I want an emergency injunction preventing the Carters from selling, transferring, or hiding anything. Daniel nodded. Already prepared. I signed the papers. Then my phone buzzed. A message from Haley. Chloe, we need to talk. Please. I showed Daniel. He laughed. She's scared. She should be. I typed one sentence. Come to my house at noon. Daniel looked at me. Are you sure? Absolutely. At exactly noon, Haley arrived. But she wasn't alone. Margaret and George came with her. And behind them stood 2 attorneys. I opened the door. Wow. I looked at Haley. Did you bring witnesses because you finally realized you're terrible at arguing? Her lawyer stepped forward. Ms. Miller, we're here to discuss the Carter family's property. No. He blinked. No. I smiled. We're here to discuss your client's criminal activities. Haley's face dropped. Margaret immediately shouted, don't threaten my daughter. I didn't. I pointed toward Daniel. He did. Daniel calmly placed a folder on the table. Haley's lawyer opened it. His expression changed. Then he opened another. And another. By the 3rd folder, he stopped speaking. I took a sip of coffee. What's wrong? He looked at Haley. Did you know about these transfers? Haley swallowed. No. I laughed. That's adorable. I slid one final document across the table. Your signature. Haley stared at it. Then another. Your bank account. Another. Your company. Her hands started shaking. Then I leaned forward. And this? I placed a photograph on the table. Haley entering a bank with Margaret. Is the part where your mother helps you forge my father's signature. Margaret's face turned white. George stared at his wife. You did what? Margaret immediately snapped. I was protecting our family. From what? George demanded. From losing everything. I smiled. You already lost everything. Everyone looked at me. I continued. The police have the files. Haley jumped to her feet. You called the police? No. Her expression briefly relaxed. Then I smiled. My lawyer did. Her face collapsed. Daniel's phone rang. He answered. Yes. He listened for a few seconds. Then he hung up. They've arrived. A knock sounded at the door. Haley immediately backed away. No. 2 officers entered. Behind them was a financial crimes investigator. The investigator looked directly at Haley. Ms. Carter, you're being questioned regarding suspected financial fraud, forgery, and theft. Haley began crying. But I'm a mother. The investigator didn't react. Margaret grabbed my arm. You can't do this. I pulled my arm away. Actually, I can. She stared at me. Why are you doing this? I smiled. Because 5 years ago, you stole from the wrong woman. Haley was escorted toward the door. Suddenly, she turned around. Chloe. I looked at her. She was crying so hard she could barely speak. Please take care of my baby. The room went silent. I stared at her. Then I shook my head. No. Her face crumpled. But Ethan wanted a lot of things. I crossed my arms. He wanted me to raise his mistress and his child. I smiled coldly. He also wanted me to forgive him. I stepped closer. I didn't do either. Haley started sobbing. I opened the door for the officers. Goodbye, Haley. She was taken away. I watched the police car disappear down the street. Then I turned around. Daniel was smiling. What? He shook his head. Nothing. What? You really are ruthless. I smiled. No. I picked up my Gucci bag. I'm just finally charging people for what they stole. Then my phone rang. It was the bank. Ms. Miller, we've completed the preliminary review of the $3 million transfer. And the money was indeed recovered from your stolen wedding assets. I smiled. Good. There's one problem. I frowned. What? The amount recovered isn't $3 million. Then how much? A pause. $27 million. I slowly lowered my phone. $27 million. I stared at Daniel. He immediately noticed my expression. What happened? I smiled. Apparently, I picked up my coat. Ethan didn't steal nearly as much from me as I thought. I walked toward the door. He stole from me. I looked back. And then he stole from the people who stole from me. I laughed. This is getting complicated. Then I smiled. But I think I'm going to enjoy untangling it. The bank called again. Ms. Miller, we finished tracing the $27 million. I frowned. And the money is only part of what your former husband recovered. I froze. How much more? Approximately $46 million. I nearly laughed. So, Ethan secretly recovered $73 million? Correct. And where is it? Your father already received it. I blinked. My father, Mr. Arthur Miller. The funds were transferred into a protected family trust. I smiled. For once, Ethan had done something useful. Then Daniel rushed into the room. Chloe, the Carter family just filed a lawsuit against you. I laughed. Of course they did. They're claiming the $73 million belongs to them. Perfect. I grabbed my bag. Let's go to court. The courtroom was packed. Margaret sat beside her lawyer, glaring at me. Haley was there too, pale and exhausted. Have criminal charges been filed? Yes, Your Honor. Haley began crying. Margaret screamed. This is a setup. I leaned back. No. I smiled. It's your family's entire life. The judge ordered the Carter assets frozen pending investigation. Margaret collapsed. Haley stared at me with pure hatred. You destroyed us. I looked at her calmly. No. I stood. You destroyed yourselves. 3 months later, the Carter family's empire was gone. Their properties were seized. Their accounts were frozen. Their shell companies were dismantled. Margaret and Haley faced criminal charges. George cooperated with investigators and disappeared from their lives entirely. And the $73 million? It legally belonged to my family. My father's first decision was simple. He transferred my share into my name. I stared at the balance, then left. 5 years ago, Ethan left me with nothing. Now his final act had returned everything he'd stolen. My lawyer looked at me. What are you going to do with it? I smiled. Nothing crazy. He raised an eyebrow. I know that look. I grabbed my Gucci bag. I'm buying back my old jewelry. That's it. And maybe the company Haley used to steal from me. Daniel stared. You're buying North Star? I smiled. No. I opened my phone. I'm buying the building it's headquartered in. I paused. Then I'm raising their rent. Daniel burst out laughing. I walked outside, finally free of the Carter family. Ethan had spent 5 years believing he could ruin my life. In the end, he accidentally rebuilt it. And honestly, that was the funniest revenge of all.